In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make the 12-point star blanket, which is a really beautiful and actually fairly easy pattern to do. I'm going to show you using this yarn that I've used here. I've started creating a blanket already, and I've used the Miller Mia Naturally Soft Aran, which is absolutely gorgeous. As you can see, I've already started using my balls of yarn. I'm not too sure of these exact colours, so I shall leave that information in the description box below, as well as links of where you can get this. But this particular yarn is calling for a 5mm crochet hook. You can obviously use whichever yarn you want, but then also make sure that you're using the corresponding crochet hook. You will need a pair of scissors and a darning needle to sew in your ends once you change colours. So I wanted to quickly show you this project that I have just started so that I can explain a few things. First of all, I have actually decided to do 3 rows of colour separated by this cream colour, and then do 3 rows and a cream, 3 rows and a cream, etc. But you could do whichever you prefer. You could start off by doing different colours right from the very beginning, or a different colour every row, or even all the same colour if you wanted to. So you really can make this blanket as unique as you like. One thing that I'm going to mention now is the fact that this pattern is going to start off by having a foundation set of rows. So building the foundation of the blanket for 6 rows. Then once we get to our 6th row, from row 7 onwards, it's just a 3-row repeat. So 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. But I'll explain that all throughout this tutorial. So go ahead, grab your yarn and let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and use this blue yarn to start with because it will be easier for you to see, and I'm going to do a magic circle. Now I do have a specific tutorial just for the magic circle, so if you're unsure of how to do it, please make sure you check that out, and I'll leave a link in the description box below for you. So you're going to start off with your magic circle and start with a chain 3. Because what we're going to do is treble crochets in this very first round. I'm talking in UK terms, so in the US this would be known as a double crochet. So this treble crochet is going to class as your first treble, and we're going to do 12 treble crochets in this circle altogether, including this chain 3. So for a treble, just to remind you, it's yarn over, insert into that centre circle, grab the yarn, pull it through. You'll have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and then yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So that is our first proper treble, and then we also have this chain 3 which is classing as a treble. So we need to do 10 more. So just to show you once more, yarn over, insert into the circle, grab the yarn, pull it through, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. What you can actually do here is start to pull on this loose end of yarn, and it just pulls in that stitch slightly. So as you're working round in a circle, it makes it easier. So go ahead and pause the video, work until you have 12 treble crochets, and meet me back once you're ready. So I've now worked my way all the way around, and I'm going to connect to that very first chain 3. So find the top of the chain 3, insert the hook, and then do a slip stitch in order to join, and that is our first round. All that we have to do now is just grab onto the middle and then pull that loose end, and then it just cinches in that centre circle. So we're now ready to move on to round 2, and as with every round we're going to chain 3 to begin, and this takes us up into the height of the treble. So we're going to do a treble crochet into the same stitch. So if you look at the base of this stitch here, we're going to do a treble crochet into there. and that will be our second treble of the round, because this is also classing as a treble. And we're going to do 2 treble crochets into each stitch, so that at the end of the round we've gone from 12 stitches in the first round to 24 stitches in the second round. So you just move on to the next stitch and do 2 trebles into the top of that stitch, 1 and 2, and then 2 trebles until you work all the way around. Make sure that you're counting each stitch and stop once you get to 24, and meet me back once you're ready. So pause the video and I shall see you in a moment. So I've just completed my 24 stitches, and I'm going to go ahead and insert my hook into the top of that chain 3 and slip stitch in order to complete that second round. I'm then going to chain 3 again, 1, 2, 3. So for this round we're actually going to work a repeat of stitches, and this is going to start building our actual peaks. So we're going to ignore this for now and come back to this stitch at the end of the row. We're going to skip this next stitch and then work into the stitch after that. So we're going to do a treble crochet into the second stitch along. We're then going to chain 2, 1, 2, and then do a treble crochet into that same stitch. And we're going to repeat that again, so we're going to skip a stitch and then work a treble crochet, a chain 2, and a treble crochet into that next stitch. Repeat again, skip a stitch, treble crochet, chain 2, and treble crochet into the same stitch. You're going to end up with 12 of these repeats all the way round. So pause the video, work your way round until you just before you get to this stitch, and I'll meet you back in just a moment. So I've just worked my way all the way around, and excluding this very first one, I have 11 of these V-shaped stitches. So I'm going to finish off my 12th one. So after I've done this one, I've got a stitch which I'm going to skip, and then you see that this one actually has that chain 3 from the beginning of the row. We're going to do that stitch into the base of that stitch. So treble, a chain 2, and then you're going to do a slip stitch into the top of that chain 3, and that creates your last V. So you have 12 of those V's all the way round, and that is the end of your round 3. Round 4, what you want to do is you want to move over into one of these chain 2 spaces. So we're going to have to slip stitch over, and all you have to do for that is insert your hook into that chain 2 space of that V and slip stitch, and it just moves you over into the correct space. We're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Remembering that this is classing as a treble. We're going to do another treble crochet in that space. We're going to do a chain 2 and then 2 more treble crochets in that same space. So 1 and 2. Going to do this in each of these chain 2 spaces, so I'll just show you that again because the next one will be slightly different because we've not done the chain 3. We'll do 2 trebles into that next chain 2 space, 1 and 2. We're going to chain 2 and then 2 trebles into the very same space. And then move into the next chain 2 space and do exactly the same thing. So go ahead, pause the video, do your 2 trebles, chain 2, 2 trebles into each of those chain 2 spaces. Meet me back once you've got to this last one here, and we'll finish off and move on to the next row. So this is the end of my round 4. I'm going to go ahead and do a slip stitch into the top of that chain 3. So I've just finished my round 4, and this is where I'm going to change colours. So I'm going to do a slip stitch into the top of that chain 3, and then I'm going to chain 1 and grab my scissors. I'm going to snip off the yarn and pull that all the way out. So of course I'm changing colours here partly so that I can show you how to change colours, and partly because that's what I've done on my other one. And I'm going to attach my next colour, and I'm going to attach it into this chain 2 space just here. So if I just grab this pinky blush colour again so it's easier for you to see on camera, all I'm simply going to do is to tie this on, and then we're ready to go. A lot of people don't like this method. You can use whichever method you prefer. If you're sticking with the same colour, I would suggest that you just simply slip stitch into over this stitch and then into the corner space or into this chain 2 space, so that we're all at the same part of the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and this is going to class as my treble. And I'm going to start off doing the same thing as what we've been doing before. So I'm going to do another treble, chain 2, and then 2 trebles into that chain 2 space. And this chain 2 is acting as the peak of the stitch, and we're now going to introduce the valleys of the stitch, so where it goes down. So it'll go up and down and up and down. So to do this, what we want to do is do a treble crochet into the next stitch, and then you can see where these 2 trebles are, it's like an upside down V. It's where this cluster of stitches and this cluster of stitches meet in the middle. We're actually going to miss both of these stitches. So if you pull it apart here, we miss this gap, and we're going to work a treble into the next gap. So a treble into that stitch just there. And then we reach the chain 2 space again, so we're going to do a treble, 2 chains, and then 2 more trebles, 1 and 2. We'll then do a treble into the top of the next stitch again, so we're working our way down into the valley. We'll skip these 2 stitches and then work a treble into the next, almost like the hill of the next peak. We're then going into our chain 2 space. So treble, treble, chain 2, and then treble, treble, and then treble into the top of the next stitch. So you're simply going to repeat that all the way around. You'll skip these 2 stitches, do a treble in the uphill, 2 trebles, chain 2, 2 trebles in the peak, a treble in the downhill, and then miss the 2 stitches of the valley. So go ahead and pause the video. I'll leave the instructions in the bottom here if you need them, and meet me back once you get to this last peak of the round. So I've just done those stitches into the last peak, so what I need to do now is finish off going into the top of the treble of the downhill treble, skip 2 stitches, and then do a treble in the uphill section. And then I'm going to slip stitch into the top of that stitch just there. So this stitch has actually fallen into the middle treble, which is correct, because if your stitches started in this first treble here, you would need to slip stitch over into the next treble along, because we don't work into these trebles of the valley stitches. So for round 6, what we're going to do is chain 3, which is classing as our treble. We're going to do another treble crochet into the next stitch. So for each round, you'll end up adding a few more stitches. So for this round, we have 2 stitches on the uphill as opposed to 1 stitch from the previous row, because we've added more stitches for this round. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing in the peak. So we're going to go ahead and do 2 treble crochets, 1 and 2, going to chain 2 and then do 2 treble crochets in that very same space. And then we're on the downhill, so we're going to do a treble into the next stitch. We have extra stitches in this round, so we're going to do a treble into the next stitch. Then we meet the valley stitches, so we miss these 2 stitches and work on the uphill. So treble into the uphill treble, and 1 into the next one, and then exactly the same thing into the peak. So 2 trebles, chain 2 and 2 trebles. So you want to go ahead and pause the video and work your way around until you get to this last peak just here, and I will meet you back in just a moment. So I've just completed my round 6, and I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch into the top of that chain 3. Now with my other blanket, I have continued with the same colour because I've done 3 blocks. However, because I'm on limited supply of this yarn, I'm going to change colours at this point. But it's worth noting, if you're continuing with the same colour, you see how you finished on this chain 3 just here, and that is actually one of the valley stitches. You would simply slip stitch over into the next treble and then do your chain 3 here. But just bear with me, I'm just going to go ahead and swap back to the blue yarn so I can continue showing you your round 7. So once you've done your 6 rows, that has laid the foundation for the rest of the round. So if you remember me saying, this is now going to be a 3-row repeat. So row 7, 8 and 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. So if you wanted to put a little stitch marker in this stitch or around this row, just to remind you that this is the first of your 3, then do whatever you need to do. So really, the pattern is really easy to follow. The only difference is we're going to do something different in the peaks this time, and I'll explain that in just a moment. So we've just done our first treble up the hill. This time we're going to do 3 trebles because we have an extra stitch there. So we'll go into the top of the next treble and then into the top of the next treble. So this is where it's slightly different, and it's only slightly. In this corner we've always done 2 trebles, a chain 2 and then 2 trebles, but this time we're just going to do 1 treble, a chain 2 and then 1 treble, and then work our way downhill again. So a treble, a treble and a treble, miss the valley, and then start working our way back up the hill. Now just so you know, the reason why we are only doing 2 trebles in this section is to stop the entire blanket from rippling. If you actually carried on just doing 2 trebles into the peak on every row, you'd get too many stitches and your work wouldn't lay flat. So this is the only row that we're going to do differently, and it's the first row of your 3-row repeat. So everything else is going to be exactly the same. So we're going to work uphill, uphill, 1 treble, chain 2 and 1 treble, and work your way back downhill again. So work your way all the way round until you get to this last downhill section, and meet me back once you've done. So I've just finished that round, so that's round 7, the first of our 3-row repeats, and I'm going to slip stitch into that chain 3 from the beginning of the row. I found myself doing the slip stitch into the valley stitches again, so I'm going to slip stitch my way across to the next stitch, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then start working up the hill. And these next 2 rows are going to be exactly the same as the other rows. So it's 2 trebles, chain 2, and then 2 trebles. And then you would work your way down the hill again. So as I say, you've got your 3-row repeat from your 7th row. So the first of the 3-row repeat is going to involve only doing 1 treble into the peak. So you have a treble, a chain 2, a treble. Work your way downhill, skip the 2 valley stitches and work your way uphill and continue round. Your 2nd and 3rd rows of the repeat are going to be the same as all the others. So working uphill, 2 trebles, chain 2, 2 trebles, working downhill, skipping the 2 stitches of the valley and working your way back uphill again. Like I said before, you can change your colours wherever you want, at whichever point you want. I would always just make sure that you are skipping this very first valley stitch just here and slip stitching or starting in the next stitch along. So that is the tutorial for the 12-point star. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with all of my latest videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you again next time. Bye!